Chargers, the real deal, Sonny.
You're an imposter!
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Kia ora, Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, it's time to take the L today, boys, all right? Chargers versus Saints, preseason disaster. Chargers walk away unvictorious. It is the beginning of the end. Not really. It's preseason. And there's a lot of things that we can take from this game, learn from, apply for the next preseason game, but more importantly, lessons that we can learn to apply towards the team, make it stronger for the regular season. So I get it. Some Chargers fans a little bit upset at this loss. At the same time, though, I do think there are things taken away from this game. They're very positive. There are things that we're going to talk about that the Chargers need to improve, mainly from the QB2 position, but also things that I think Chargers fans should get very, very excited for because, hey, the TCU receivers are looking great. We've got a tight end sighting. We've got defensive line. I should say the defense as a whole looking pretty good. We're going to pick this game apart and give you guys some of the details as to why I think this game, although a loss on the scoreboard, was kind of a win in terms of evaluation, especially for some certain positions like receiver and defense as a whole. So before we do get started, guys, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I don't know if how many of you guys yesterday were in on the action for the preseason game. It was a lot of fun. Between the Easton Stick yardage, the day in, or not the day in Henley, but the Darius Davis sort of stat lines too. It was pretty fun to watch. If you guys want to get in on the action, definitely use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Get your feet wet in the preseason, y'all. Learn the platform. It is my favorite by far for a reason, and definitely get ready for the regular season when things really start counting. So before we do kick off, guys, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this video. Lights, camera, action. Your Chargers versus Saints post-game disaster report. Not really. I mean, again, like, it does sting a little bit to lose a game no matter what it is. I know you guys see me rage when we do the Sim series with the Madden games, right? I get upset at those, and they're not even real. You can almost say the same thing about the preseason. Still, good times out there. We learned a lot. Let's go ahead and jump into this video with our first topic, Easton Stick. I know a lot of Chargers fans probably upset at number 2 after last night's performance, but at the same, I should say, Sunday night's performance. This is probably going to release on Tuesday. Definitely something that Chargers fans need to monitor as far as the backup quarterback position. It's kind of crazy to think because this was a completely different version than the Easton Stick that we saw in Week 1. Week 1 was fantastic. I felt like, oh my God, finally, we've got a QB2 that I feel extremely confident in, a QB2 that, you know, can probably pick up the task and run with it if called upon. And in this game was completely the opposite. Now, of course, he's a backup quarterback, and of course, every quarterback, even Justin Herbert at times, can have a bad game, and it can happen to anybody. And maybe that was just it with Easton Stick. Maybe he had a bad game. And sometimes, guys, bad games are defining for players. It's the thing that sticks with them, right? And I have a feeling that Easton Stick went home. He thought a lot about that performance, and he's going to be working extra hard with the coaching staff this week in order to correct a lot of those errors. Now, in particular, I wanted to kind of pick around what I saw with Easton Stick that I think is going to need a lot of improvement. If you guys caught my Bleacher Report episode right after the game, the reaction, which is also posted on the channel, by the way, you'll have heard me talk a lot about Easton Stick's decision-making. And that's something I felt was very defining of his Week 1 game versus the Rams. I was like, man, this guy, he is quick. He's quick to read the field. He's quick to pick a target. He's quick to deliver the ball. He's quick. And I felt very good about that. That's something that you want to see from a backup quarterback. I would say a good backup quarterback in a lot of instances are more of game managers, right? They're going to push the ball down the field by whatever means possible. And a lot of the times that means taking what the defense gives you, right? And a lot of Chargers fans don't want to see an offense like this, a little more dink and dunk, take the underneath stuff, you know, try and find somebody open, even if they're, you know, closer to the line of scrimmage. But when a offense is not designed for you. This offense is designed for Justin Herbert, and probably the version that they're running in the preseason is more designed as like a vanilla offense. You need to make the decisions that generate, chunk yardage, or even just a little bit. It all kind of adds up, right? And the biggest thing I saw from Easton Stick and his decision making on Sunday was certainly the ignoring of the easy yards, right? It feels like when Easton Stick was going through his progressions, he saw the underneath man, he saw maybe the hook curl or whatever, and he decided, I'm gonna wait and see if that out route can develop. I feel like 50% of the time, Easton was waiting for an out route to develop on the sideline. And maybe, yes, that's something the Chargers are trying to pound into the heads of the quarterbacks. Like, hey, we want to control the sidelines this season. Try to make that happen in this game. If that's the case, like I said, good on Easton Stick. But when you're in a situation like this, I feel like you've got to take that dump off whenever necessary. And I think with the options that he had underneath, outside of a Dodson, which we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, who was dropping everything, we did see some options underneath that were kind of ignored. I think we saw a lot of balls forced to John Hightower that ended up being incomplete. Good coverage by the Saints, of course. We saw a lot of stuff up top that were getting broken up. But I did see guys like even Darius Davis, on those drags, on those slants underneath, getting passed up on to throw into double coverage, which is kind of confusing to me. And it's something that I feel like Easton Stick is definitely going to have to work on. Take what the defense gives you. Take what the defense gives you, right? That'll definitely help him out in future games. And it's something that we saw a lot of last week. Like, he was very good at reading the field, making those decisions quick. By the time some guys were open or available, by the time he was getting ready to release it, we saw him pull it down a lot. He had missed that window. And I think those windows, continually watching them become missed and missed and missed, having to take off. He ended up, I think, having a crazy amount of rushing yards, something like 60-something rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. That works for him. But in the passing game, you got to take what the defense gives you. So Easton Stick this week, definitely something that Chargers fans need to monitor. A big thing that Chargers fans were asking me after the game, too, was director. Oh, my God, the prodigy. The offensive play calling. Is it all a lie? Is it just sham? Have we been bamboozled? No, it's not the case at all, guys. I'll say right now that, of course, I think we're all kind of waiting for Kellen Moore, not to mess up, but to be able to hold him accountable for something that I truly do believe is maybe his fault. In this game in particular, though, like I was just mentioning with Easton Stick, and the big reason why I wanted to push that narrative forward of his decision-making was the fact that I did see a lot of players open. I did see a lot of plays where Easton Stick goes to, like, again, the out route on the left side, and then you see, an angle route that's developed over the middle with the running back, or a curl that's wide open, on the right side of the field, or, a post like we saw. Again, we'll talk about QJ here in just a second, that could have developed into something if led, properly down the field. A lot of those decisions were ignored for players in which he'd have to force the ball into a tight window. I don't think I put any of that on Kellen Moore. I feel like I've paid way more attention at the top of the season, especially even in the preseason, at what the play calling looks like, as well as what the result of the play was. In this instance, I think 99% of what we saw was as a result of a quarterback struggling in the preseason. All right, so don't worry about Kellen Moore, but trust me, the moment that we see something a little shoddy, a little sketchy, we will speak up about it, but I don't think it at all is something to worry about for the Chargers fans right now, okay? Next segment called QJ Redemption. QJ Redemption. Chargers fans will remember week 1 is like an up and down week, right, for Quentin Johnson. He had a couple of drops in that game, but, quickly redeemed with that big touchdown over the middle from Easton Stick in week 1. Kind of crazy how different Easton Stick looked in week 2. Anyway, Quentin Johnson comes back in the week 2, and I think it was 3 receptions for, I think it was something like 30-something yards, 20-something yards. Either way, we didn't see any drops. And we saw some good examples of Quentin Johnson going up and catching with his hands, something that Chargers fans, I feel like we needed that proof this week. We needed that proof that Quentin Johnson, last week, he was probably still shaking off the rust of bad habits coming out of TCU or whatever. He was more capable this week of showing the improvement that we had seen during camp, and that was very, very encouraging. Now, again, we didn't see a lot of, targets or receptions. I don't think he had any drops this week. We didn't see a lot of targets or opportunity, but we did see, when given those opportunities, him capitalize on them. And one of them, I think, the most impressive, I think it may have been this play where Quentin Johnson, it looked like he ran an in route or a post right over the middle of the field, gets underneath the coverage and comes down again with a tough catch through contact, which once again, Chargers fans need to get excited about. Chargers fans have had issues in terms of our wide receivers and their speed, their yak ability. coming down, catching through contact, et cetera, for a couple of years now. It feels like Quentin Johnson is filling a huge void. He could turn into that star, in the making right now. I feel like it's going to take him a few weeks into the season, 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks before really getting up into speed. But seeing the improvement, there's, I think, 3 checkpoints that I was looking for. We saw what he did at TCU. We saw a checkpoint, I would say, in mini camp, right, in the offseason, and going into training camp. We saw another checkpoint there where we saw a lot of improvement. And now we're at the 3rd checkpoint of the preseason, where, again, every single checkpoint I have seen improvement, right? From TCU to camp, now into the preseason, I see improvement every step along the way. And that's something that's very exciting as a Chargers fan, to finally see that speed, finally see that yak ability from the wide receiver position. And of course, another big body that fits the mold of a NFL wide receiver. Also something to get excited about. So QJ redeemed this game. Would like to see him continue that next week with a couple of more opportunities. But keep catching with those hands. Keep working on the availability in terms of route running. He looked really good there. Not too bad. Not too bad. Next up, though, I'm going to say this name is generating a lot of hype from yours truly. I get it, guys. I can latch on to a story or a player or the thought of a player or the thought of a scenario with the Chargers and kind of get a little obsessed with it, right? You guys have seen it in the past with me with a couple of different, scenarios. Some of them wrong, like, oh my God, what would it be like if, Derwin James could play with Jalen Ramsey? That'd be crazy. And then some of them right, like, oh my God, we got Brandon Staley. Let's go trade for a Khalil Mack. Either way, the narrative that I'm kind of starting to latch on to is the idea that Darius Davis is way more than he was drafted to be, way more than NFL fans think he is, and is becoming that way faster than a lot of us had expected. I think we all thought that there might be some potential for that later down the road, but I think it's starting to kind of blossom in front of our eyes as a potential wide receiver threat, as a potential weapon for Justin Herbert, which he hasn't seen any targets from Justin Herbert in the preseason quite yet, which is also very remarkable. This segment called The Rise of Darius Davis. Now, you guys will know that Davis, he's been pretty fantastic in his first 2 weeks, right? Of course, the first week in special teams, taking one to the house, that lit the Chargers fandom ablaze with excitement, right? It was very, very cool to see that. In week 2, special teams, he did have a couple of really nice returns, right? I think one for like 30-something yards, which was fantastic. He did have the one muffed return, which is something that we saw at a TCU. He's going to have to clean that up. But I'm more focused in on what he's offered as a receiver, okay? I think I posted the stat line on Twitter yesterday. I think in the preseason, Dan Henley, as of right now, is 5 for 5 and 45 yards. And you would tell yourself, in any other game or in the preseason, whatever, like, yeah, that's not the most impressive stat. Like, what are we all kind of freaking out about? You have to watch those plays for one, right? It tells a broad story as to why I'm excited about Darius Davis all of a sudden. In those opportunities, he's displayed a lot of skill sets that go beyond just his speed. So at the very top of that, yes, the speed is impressive. It's something that Chargers fans have been hyping and wanting for this team for a long time. We can go ahead and check that box right now. But it's the things beyond that get me excited for Darius Davis and his potential, maybe even this season. I don't know. Maybe it's going to take some time. Maybe it takes a season or two for this potential to be realized or for him to be molded into the, game plan this way. But the other boxes I'm seeing checked, right? The hands. I saw another catch through contact today or on Sunday that really impressed me in terms of helping the Chargers score. I think it was a post over the middle again, like Quentin Johnson. He had to come down through contact. That looks very cool. That was very cool to see. And again, he's starting to prove it. With this consistency, I'm starting to think, okay, we can fit it into those windows with Davis. The durability is probably the biggest thing I'm worried about because he is a smaller player, but he shows that he's capable of doing that when called upon in those situations. We're starting to see the route running, again, proving that it's more than what we thought in the offseason. I thought this was a go-route guy, right? I thought this was a streak guy, a guy that, works the sideline or the seam, right, and just kind of pushes the defense back. No. I'm seeing some crispy route running out there, man. I think I saw a zig underneath at one point last week that he took to the sideline. Fantastic. Of course, we've seen, these like curls and these ins and outs, like right under coverage through contact. That's been fantastic. But we've seen the availability, especially when you match it up with that speed, it becomes more than that. The yak ability, too, off of those like drags and slants and stuff like that. The potential for that to go to the house exists with Darius Davis because he does have that speed. So again, speed, route running, hands, yak ability, toughness, there's a lot of things that he's checking these boxes for. And if you guys have watched me for any of these amount of times, the years that we've been on YouTube, Chargers fans have been wanting wide receivers that are fast. I've always said that, yes, let's grab a guy that's fast, but wide receivers are way more than just speed. We're going to have to find a guy that's fast that also has decent route running, also has decent hands, things that we can work and grow with over their time as a Charger, but they need to carry something in terms of those traits. And right now, Darius Davis, without a single drop, while catching and coming down with every opportunity he's had so far, 5 for 5 is impressive, especially with a couple of those targets being, with the defender right on top of him, is very impressive. I don't know, guys. And I'm going to put something together at some point about this. Years ago, I think 2016, there was a young man by the name of Tyreek Hill that was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs to be a returner, then slowly inserted as a gadget player, these screens and swings and stuff like that. They handed him the ball off a lot of times too. As he continued to kind of display these other skill sets, they got him more involved into the offense. That speed matched up with a talented quarterback like Patrick Mahomes was very evident in how that was going to be successful. I think it was even before Patrick Mahomes that we started seeing signs of that. Now with the Chargers, you're seeing something a little similar. It's impossible for me not to point that out when I see it, okay? Darius Davis, he could end up being something special. I'm starting to really feel in my gut like he could be the real deal. We'll probably do a whole video on him at some point, okay? Next up, a bit of a shorter segment here. Smart tight end hype, okay? First off, I'll start off with the bad news. The bad news is that we saw a touchdown likely not happen because of the lack of playmaking by Donald Parham, which really sucks, right? He had a touchdown right in front of him, decently placed ball by Easton Stick. It could have been a little better, but it was very catchable, in which it flies in and out of the hands of Donald Parham, which kind of blows. On the other hand, though, we've seen a lot of hype out of camp, specifically out of Gerald Everett, with this man, Stone Smart, right, who has been turning some heads at camp. And I think in this preseason game in particular, he's showing that he does have some nice skills as a receiver. I would love to and be interested to see what his skill set looks like as a blocker, because this could, in theory, challenge the position of a Trey McKitty as far as the 53 is concerned. I think out of what the small sample size has shown me of Stone Smart, I actually like him a bit more as a receiving option for Justin Herbert, but it feels like the Chargers are keeping McKitty around for his blocking as well. If he looks good as a blocker as well, he might have a spot on this team by kickoff. So we'll have to wait and see how that develops. All right, so a little small segment there. Next up, one of the biggest things I loved about this game, of course, it was a loss. There are things to be worried about on offense. Defense, let's go ahead and start the hype with Dan Henley, right? If there was anything good to take out of this game, it's the fact that Dan Henley looked fantastic, okay? And I feel like this is almost like, again, the origins of what he could become for the Chargers even this season. Now, you guys will know in my hot takes video weeks ago, maybe like a month ago or so, I felt like Dan Henley was going to overtake the starting job of inside linebacker 2 next to Eric Kendricks. He was going to overtake that by midseason, right? So we're talking like week 8, week 7, something like that. I think that's actually becoming more and more likely with the kind of play that we're seeing out of him, specifically in coverage. Now, there was one play where he got burned for a big reception by Kendre Miller, right? There's a wheel on the sideline. However, that to me is less on Dan Henley and more on just a spectacular play by the Saints, right? Kendre Miller, he looks awesome. I think it was a ball placed by, it was either Hayner or, you guys know. Either way, great ball placement, even better catch by the running back. I don't know if I put that on Henley at all. If you do watch that play, though, Henley was with him step for step that entire time, and wheel routes are very difficult to cover. So good for Dan Henley on that note. But besides that, throughout the entirety of the game, we saw the Ranger, which I love that nickname for him, present in pretty much every situation, whether it was closer to the line of scrimmage versus the run, he was getting in there, or getting in after the quarterback as a pass rusher. He looked good there. I think he ended up getting half a sack that game as well. Or whether it was in coverage, playing the sticks or playing the sideline or over the middle, whatever. It feels like Dan Henley was just present this entire game, and that's something that really displays his speed, his coverage ability, his play recognition. I just liked a lot of what I saw from him this week. And I think, again, just as such a young player coming in the preseason, there's even more room for him to grow. So Dan Henley, continue doing what you do. We've heard a lot of good things about Kenneth Murray as well. The Chargers linebacker group may be in better hands than we think, but Dan is definitely developing into a nice piece down the road for the Chargers. Next up on the defense. Hey, man, it's Tuli time. Tuli Tuipulotu made his first splash play of the offseason. You guys will remember it was a run up the middle. I think it was Merriweather. It could have been Kendre Miller, and here comes Tuli Tuipulotu. Beautiful swim move, completely destroying. I think it was Trevor Penning, too. They're starting right tackle, left tackle, either outside tackle for the Saints, and he gets in there for a nice tackle for loss. 4 yards lost on that play. That was just one play of the night that I saw. The best play, of course, of Tuli. But the big thing that I appreciated about his performance in week 2 of the preseason, so it was very similar to what I described with Dan Henley. He was present, right? Plenty of pressures, always in and around the ball carrier, and of course, you know, in and around the area of the quarterback, generating that heat. It felt like for sure when Tuli is thrown into the rotation this season, we are going to see a much higher caliber of play from him that keeps things consistent in terms of our pass rush than we have in years past. The Chargers being 3 deep on very good pass rushers is something fresh, something new that we haven't seen in a long time, and I think it's going to be something we come to appreciate very, very quickly. I'm still anticipating Tuli's first sack, maybe of the preseason or the regular season, but from what I'm seeing, again, he's got the skill set to get in after the run. That those moves are developing on the outside. Of course, it looked like a little mini flash of Joey Bosa, right? Did you guys see that on the outside there? That quick move, like it feels like someone's been paying attention in class, baby. And Tuli getting tutored by 2 of the best to ever play the position. Of course, their names are in the conversation, and Mac and Joey Bosa it's kind of starting to reflect even in the preseason. So Tuli, very, very cool to see him play. Did I end up getting a picture of Matlock? Please tell me I did. I did not. It's okay. We're gonna also talk a little bit about in this segment the defensive line as a whole. Okoye came back and had a very solid game this week. Matlock, oh my God, dudes. I got to tell you, there's one play in particular I have to describe. It was a screen by the Saints. I think it was Merriweather who was the receiver there. It developed beautifully, right? Blockers were where they were supposed to be. The running back started taking off. The only man on the heels of this running back was Scott Matlock. And you see this guy running over there. He's a huge guy, man. He looked like a big old blueberry chasing that running back. You thought to yourself, there's no way, man. This is going to go for some yards. But because of the angle, you didn't notice how quick that big man was closing that distance. All of a sudden, there's big Scott Matlock chomping down on that running back. And he had no business being there, man. He has no business being that fast either. So Scott Matlock, man, bravo to him. I'm very excited to see him climb in terms of the hype for the Chargers. He's been looking fantastic in terms of a depth piece for the Chargers at defensive line. Who knows? Maybe he gets a little bit more work in the future. But that was a play that really impressed me. Holy cow! Great hustle by the defensive lineman. Quick little note here. Down Dodson is this next segment. We won't take too long on these next 2 segments. Just something to note. Okay, Elijah Dodson. Huge studded star from week 1, right? A lot of us were excited to see what he had to do in week 2. He came out and he had a couple of nice runs to start things off, but I think the defining moments you're going to remember from this game for Dodson, unfortunately, are going to be those drop passes over the middle. Very simple route by the running back that could have cost the Chargers this win, right? You saw a lot of space in front of him. At very minimum, first down opportunities that forced the Chargers by his drops into very tough situations, and ultimately the loss. Not all on him, of course. I think Easton Stick carries most of that blame this week, but it's putting a highlight, it's putting a focus on a weakness of this player, and of course, I think a lot of us have come to understand it's probably his catching ability or lack thereof. And in order to make the 53, Dodson had to play very, very well in the last 2 weeks of the preseason. This is definitely going to put a hiccup in that plan, a speed bump in that plan. And unless he has a really, really, really solid week 3, I think his likeliness to make the 53 are very, very low. So we had to actually kind of mention that. I hope that, because when he was running, he still looked very, very fantastic. But I think the Chargers, if you take a look at the characteristics of all 3 of their starting backs, all 3 of them can catch. I think that's a big deal to the Chargers, and it could be a pretty severe tally mark against Elijah Dodson's hope to make the 53. Speaking of which, a bit of a down game for a player I was very anticipative of seeing in his first preseason action was John Hightower. This segment called John Lowtower. There was a lot of passes thrown his way where he was just plain covered, right? And again, Easton Stick maybe shouldn't have covered him there, but it was opportunities for John Hightower to try and make a play. Of course, he wasn't able to do that, wasn't able to make that happen. I just felt a little underwhelmed, especially with all the camp hype that we've seen from Hightower in terms of his availability, in terms of his ability to get open and his speed. Didn't see much of that this week. I'm hoping we see a redemption arc for him too as we go into week 3. And then finally, last couple of segments here. We're going to end on a really good note. Okay, this segment called JT and the 33. Okay, JT Woods and Dean Leonard are starting to become this little preseason tandem of terror. I love it, dude. And I feel like we're seeing so much in terms of improvement from both of these players from last season that's impossible not to see, like, oh my God, there is some upside here all of a sudden. JT Woods last season was a dumpster fire. He was a wreck. He was definitely not someone I wanted out there, even in, relief of like a Derwin James. This season, it's different. We're seeing him play closer to the line of scrimmage. I wouldn't have thought that in a million years last season because of how terrible his tackling was. This season, tackling a lot better. JT Woods, in terms of his positioning, a lot better. His coverage, a lot better. He's just a matter of time before he picks up his first interception, maybe even next week in the preseason. I'm very impressed with JT Woods. And then on top of that, all of a sudden, you're starting to notice the upside of his size and speed. Very fast, very tall, 6'1", 6'2", something like that. He's going to be a great piece of this offense if he continues on that path. And then next to him, you see Dean Leonard, who also has taken a lot of steps forward. Both of these guys struggled tremendously in coverage last year. Both of these guys had a lot of trouble, keeping up in any way in their positioning. And I feel like this season's been a complete flip of the script for both of these guys. So bravo to both of these DBs, man. They continue to impress me a little bit more each preseason game in camp. I know camp is maybe a little bit sketchier for JT Woods, but where it really counts in live action football, it feels like he came to play. So JT Woods, Dean Leonard, I think Woods going to have a more present role this season as a relief Derwin role. But Dean Leonard, man, we already know he's a stud on special teams. Maybe he does see some opportunity from Coach Staley in the defense. Who knows? Who knows? And lastly, to wrap up this video, Great Scott is the last segment here. We could not end this without a huge shout out to the punter. In my opinion, probably a top 3 punter in the NFL, J.K. Scott, who's been absolutely fantastic. Every time this man gets the football, I know it's like we don't want to punt. You kind of start counting in your head, right? Almost like when you watch a movie where someone goes underwater, you kind of start counting in your head or hold your breath. Same thing for me when I see JK and his punting opportunities. That hang time is absolutely ridiculous. Very proud of this guy, man. In a year, a lot of us wanted Matt Ariza. We ended up getting this guy, J.K. Scott, who, in my opinion, we got the way better end of the deal, obviously. So, J.K. Scott, good for him. To wrap up this video, yes, a loss sucks. A loss can sting. A loss is something you don't want to see, even in the preseason. However, I would be remiss in saying that we didn't learn a lot from this game. I think the defense definitely shined this week. I know a lot of fans are probably looking at Coach Staley saying, hey, that's a happy face right there. It's because I think the young players on his roster in terms of his defense really went out and proved that they have the upside that he saw in them, especially when they got drafted. Right, I think it was a lot of Brandon Staley and his influence for guys like Dean Leonard, for guys like Jasir Taylor, for guys like JT Woods, of course. And we're starting to see that flourish in the defense. So a great win for the defense this week. 22 points, definitely not terrible, especially considering we saw a lot of Jameis Winston this week. But of course, a lot of plays made, a lot of upside realized, and a lot of potential still to be discovered. So some great things to see this week. Let me know what you guys say in the comment section below too, or some of your favorite moments from preseason week 2. Try and look past the loss. It's not about the loss. It's about learning from these experiences as far as what the team looks like, what they can develop into. I think there's a lot there. I really do. The biggest things, obviously, that we're worried about is the QB2 play, some things like that. But I think outside of that, you're seeing a lot of guys step up, and you're seeing a lot of potential beginning to become realized with like Darius Davis, right? Maybe Stone Smart, Scott Matlock. Some good things happening this preseason. So let me know what you guys think. Well, if you guys liked this content, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Y'all gonna think I'm crazy, man, but Darius Davis, he could be the Tyreek Hill of the Chargers. You never know.